My name is Matthew Whitmore, and the day that changed everything for me was June 3, 2022. I was living a fairly normal life at the time, working as a surgical tech at a hospital just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I had a little place on the edge of town, a quiet spot where I could hear the crickets at night and sometimes see deer crossing the road early in the morning. I wasn't a bad person. I believed in God, sure. I prayed when things got tough. But if I'm being honest with you, I didn't really know Him. Not like I thought I did. My faith was more like something I kept in a dusty drawer, something I'd pull out in emergencies. I'd go to church on Easter and Christmas, maybe when I was feeling guilty, but the rest of the time I was too busy with work, with scrolling on my phone, with worrying about bills, or with complaining about whatever wasn't going right in my life. That morning started like any other, rushed, coffee in hand, halfway dressed while I brushed my teeth and tried to remember if I'd fed the dog. I had a long shift ahead, and I wasn't in the mood. But halfway through assisting in a routine procedure, I started to feel dizzy. I thought maybe it was low blood sugar or dehydration, something simple. I excused myself, stepped into the hallway, and the next thing I knew, my knees gave out beneath me. Everything went black. I thought I'd just fainted, maybe hit my head. But it was more than that. So much more. Because what I experienced next wasn't a dream, and it wasn't some flicker of consciousness inside a passing moment. It was as if I had stepped out of my body, completely and fully, and I was suddenly aware of everything in a way I can't explain with earthly words. I could see myself on the ground, my coworkers rushing to me, someone calling for help, but I wasn't scared. Not at first. I just felt detached. And then, almost like a magnetic pull, I was yanked away, upward and outward into what I can only describe as a vast, brilliant nothingness filled with presence. A presence that made every hair on my spirit stand on end. It was peaceful but also terrifying. Not because it was dark, but because I could feel how unworthy I was to be where I was. And then He came. I didn't see Him right away. It was more like I felt Him before I saw Him. An energy, no, more than that, a holiness, something too pure for this world. Then He appeared, and it was Jesus. I knew it instantly. Not because I recognized His face from some painting, but because my soul recognized Him. Like He had always been there, just outside my line of vision my whole life, waiting. The moment He looked at me, I couldn't stand. My knees, spiritually, emotionally, whatever part of me was left, collapsed beneath the weight of it. His eyes were unlike anything I've ever seen. They didn't just look at me, they looked through me. I remember trying to speak, trying to say I was sorry, that I didn't know, that I'd lived so far away from Him without realizing how far I'd gone. But I couldn't form words. It was like my thoughts were being spoken without my mouth moving. And He heard all of it. Every broken apology. Every regret. Every excuse. And then, without a word, He reached out His hand and touched my face, not with judgment, but with a kind of love that shattered me. He didn't need to say, "I forgive you." I felt it, like it was wrapping itself around every lie I'd ever believed about myself. He didn't tell me everything was okay. In fact, what came next was not comforting at all. It was urgent. Deeply urgent. He said, "You must tell them." Just those words. But when He said it, I knew He meant the world. Humanity. Every person walking through life half asleep. Everyone who had stopped listening. Everyone too busy, too distracted, too numb to notice they're drifting further and further away from what truly matters. From Him. His voice, when He said it, wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. But it was final. Like the sound of a locked door. You must tell them before it's too late. That's when I saw it. I was suddenly shown something I can only describe as a veil being lifted. Like I was watching the earth from some impossible vantage point, and I could see it shaking. Not physically, though there were things that looked like disasters, yes, but spiritually. I saw people clinging to things that were crumbling. Money, fame, their opinions, their ideologies, their followers on social media. And all of it was slipping through their fingers like sand. I saw hearts turning to stone, eyes looking everywhere but up. And then I saw something worse. I saw people who thought they were saved, thought they were good, even thought they were close to God, but they weren't. They were just religious, going through the motions, showing up at church but never letting God touch their hearts. Jesus was showing me this, not to scare me, but to open my eyes, to show me what's really happening beneath the surface of this world. And then he repeated it. You must tell them. And this time, I understood what he meant. Not just tell them that he's real. Not just that he loves them. But that there's not much time. That the clock is moving faster than anyone thinks. That we are running out of chances to wake up. He told me, tell them I'm coming. And not in a metaphorical way. Not in a someday maybe way. But soon. And he said something else. Something that hit me so hard I haven't slept the same since. He said, some of them won't make it. Not because I didn't love them, but because they never chose me. The moment he said that, I felt my spirit scream. Not in fear for myself, but for everyone I knew. My brother, who mocks church. My cousin who thinks crystals and energy are enough. My coworker who says, I'm spiritual, not religious. I felt crushed under the weight of it. This wasn't about winning debates or being right. It was about souls. And I suddenly realized how casual I had been about the eternal destiny of everyone around me. As soon as I realized that, everything around me seemed to blur into light. It was like I was being pulled back, like the moment was ending. I didn't want it to. I begged him to let me stay. I said, please don't send me back. I don't want to leave you. And he just looked at me with those same eyes that saw every part of me, and said, this isn't your time. But I chose you to speak. They'll doubt you. Some will mock you. But you must tell them anyway. And then, just like that, I woke up. I gasped like someone coming up from underwater, drenched in sweat, the bright lights of the hospital blinding my eyes. I was in a hospital bed. They told me I'd collapsed, that I stopped breathing for almost 3 minutes. That they had to use CPR. That I was lucky to be alive. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt wrecked. The world suddenly looked different to me. Everyone was moving so fast, so distracted. I wanted to scream, don't you see? He's real. He's coming. But I couldn't. Not right away. It took me days to process it. Nights of crying in bed, pacing the kitchen, writing down everything I could remember. And then I started talking. To my mom. To my coworkers. To strangers online. And now I'm telling you. Because I can't keep this to myself. I'm not sharing this to get views, or followers, or attention. I'm sharing it because I was told to. Because Jesus told me, personally, to tell you, time is running out. He is real. He loves you. But you have to turn to him. Not just with words, but with your whole heart. Because this world is fading, and eternity is closer than you think. When I got home from the hospital, everything was louder. Not just in sound, but in spirit. The television blared emptiness. The scrolling on my phone felt poisonous. Even small talk with neighbors or coworkers felt like sandpaper against my soul. It was as though I'd come back to a world that was asleep, and I couldn't go back to sleep with it. I walked into my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and sobbed like a child. My hands trembled just holding a pen, trying to write down everything Jesus had shown me. But even with all the urgency and clarity, the hardest part wasn't remembering the vision. It was knowing how to live afterward. You don't just go back to regular life after being touched by the King of Kings. You don't just return to your routines and ignore what you now know. But that's exactly what the world tries to get you to do. I'd wake up each morning and feel this war inside me. Part of me wanted to shout from the rooftops about what I'd seen, while the other part felt the crushing weight of knowing people wouldn't believe me. That they'd roll their eyes or accuse me of making it up. But I couldn't stay silent. I began to pray, not those half-asleep bedtime prayers or polite dinner blessings, but raw, face-on-the-floor kind of praying. The kind that splits you open. I asked God for courage, for direction, for the right words. I begged Him not to let me forget a single moment from that encounter. And He was faithful. In dreams, in scripture, in the quietest moments of the night, He kept pressing it deeper into me. Tell them. Every time I wanted to delay or hide, I'd see a flash in my spirit of someone falling away, someone drifting, someone thinking they had more time. And I couldn't bear it. I couldn't let my fear of being misunderstood outweigh my obedience to the one who saved me. The dreams started soon after. Not the kind of dreams you wake up and forget in 5 minutes, but the kind that leave you shaking and drenched in sweat. In one of them, I saw highways filled with people who were asleep. Literally asleep, laying on the ground in the middle of the road as cars swerved and chaos erupted around them. Some had headphones on. Others were just staring at their phones, completely unaware of the danger. I saw this massive clock above the highway. Its hands were moving so fast they were just a blur, and then they suddenly stopped. Dead still. And in that silence, I heard His voice again, clearer than thunder but gentler than wind. The hour has stopped. The window is closing. And then I woke up gasping, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I knew what it meant. We're living in borrowed time. There's an urgency that most people have numbed themselves to. They think because life keeps going on, everything must be fine. But it's not. Spiritually, we're in a drought. And people are dying of thirst with fountains just inches from their hands because no one's telling them to look up. I started writing down these dreams, sharing them with anyone who'd listen. Some people were shaken. Some people blocked me. Others just said, "That's intense," and moved on like I'd sent them a movie recommendation. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I started spending hours in the Word, and it felt like verses were leaping off the page, aligning exactly with what I had seen. Matthew 24. Revelation 3. Isaiah 55. It was all there. He's not hiding. He's not playing games. He's warning. He's calling. He's giving us chance after chance to come back to Him before it's too late. And all He wants is our hearts, surrendered, humbled, ready. One night I was sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars, and I asked God, "Why me? There are better men, smarter men, pastors, missionaries, people with platforms and followings. Why give this message to me, a flawed, average guy with no real voice?" And His answer hit me like lightning. Not audibly, but in my spirit, sharp and unmistakable, "Because you were willing to listen." That broke me. I wasn't chosen because I was qualified. I was chosen because I was available. And that's when it hit me. Maybe the reason so many people aren't hearing from God isn't because He's silent, but because we've filled our lives with so much noise we can't hear Him. We've created echo chambers of entertainment, distraction, and comfort, and then we wonder why God feels distant. He's not distant. We are. And the moment I got quiet, truly quiet, I heard Him. And I've never stopped hearing Him since. Not every moment, not always clearly, but enough to know I'm not alone. Enough to know He's still speaking. Enough to know He hasn't given up on us. But that window, it's closing. Not because He's cruel, but because His justice and mercy are both real. He will not be mocked forever. He will not wait forever. There's a point where choices become consequences, and love becomes judgment. I've seen the edge of that moment. I've felt the weight of it in my bones. And it's coming faster than we think. That's why I'm telling you all of this. Not to scare you, but to shake you awake. If you're reading this, it's not too late. If there's breath in your lungs, there's hope. But don't wait. Don't gamble your eternity on someday. There was another part of the vision I didn't share right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't know how to say it without sounding crazy. But now I don't care how it sounds. You need to know. When Jesus showed me the world from above, he also showed me something that looked like a divide running straight through the earth. It was glowing, not like fire, but like something alive. And I realized it wasn't a fault line or a crack in the earth. It was a spiritual line, a line of separation. On one side were people covered in light. They weren't perfect, but they were surrendered. You could see their spirits connected to heaven. And on the other side were people in shadows. Some were covered in chains. Others were completely asleep. But here's the terrifying part. Many of them looked exactly like the people in church pews. Polite, smiling, even singing. But they weren't lit from within. They were going through the motions. And Jesus whispered, "Not all who say to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom." I wept when I saw that, because I knew I had been one of them. I had sung songs, said prayers, donated money, and still been asleep. Still been lost. Still been building my life on sand. But His grace pulled me out. And now I've made it my mission to reach as many as I can before that line becomes permanent. Before that separation becomes eternal. Please, don't wait until it's too late. Don't think this message is for someone else. It's for you. Right here, right now. Jesus is calling. Not just to believe in Him, but to surrender to Him. Fully. Completely. Without excuses. Because the time is short. And eternity is forever. I started noticing that the more I shared this message, the more spiritual resistance I faced. I don't mean people just disagreeing or mocking me, though that happened plenty. I mean this almost suffocating heaviness that would settle over me, especially right before I was about to speak or write about what Jesus showed me. I remember one night, sitting in my car outside a church where I was invited to speak to a small men's group. The sky was overcast, the wind was howling, and I could feel something pushing down on me, like invisible hands gripping my chest. It wasn't fear of public speaking. I've dealt with that before. This was darker, more deliberate, a force that wanted me to shut up. I could feel it so clearly in that moment that I almost turned the key in the ignition and drove away. But then I remembered His voice, what He said to me in that light. Tell them. So I stepped out of the car, heart pounding, legs weak, and walked inside. The men sat in a circle, relaxed and chatting, and when I told them what happened to me, how I left my body, how Jesus spoke to me, and how real that other realm was, most of them went dead silent. One of them, a grizzled construction worker, wiped a tear from his cheek. Another guy just stared at the floor. At the end, the leader came up to me and said, "I don't know if everyone's ready for this, but thank you for telling the truth." That hit me harder than he knew. Because I realized this isn't about me being believed. It's about the truth being heard. And that means pushing through every bit of resistance, even when it feels like you're speaking into the void. I've lost friends over this. Good people. People I've known since childhood. They think I've gone off the deep end or that I'm using religion to cope with trauma. But this isn't trauma. This isn't imagination. This is truth. Undeniable, eternal, soul-shaking truth. And it's the kind of truth that doesn't care about your reputation, your comfort, or your social standing. It just demands to be spoken. And that's what Jesus made so clear to me during that experience. He's not coming back for half-hearted people. He's not coming back for those who sprinkle a little bit of faith over their lives like seasoning. He's coming back for those who are fully His. Heart, soul, mind, and strength. I remember asking Him, while still in that glowing space, why so many people who claim to believe seem so empty, so directionless. And his reply echoed through me like a bell, because they've never surrendered. They believe I exist, but they don't follow me. That truth pierced me. I knew it was me. I had called myself a Christian for most of my life, but I had been the pilot of my own ship. Jesus was my lifeboat, not my captain. And yet, even in that moment of realization, he didn't condemn me. He looked at me with eyes so full of sorrow and love that I nearly collapsed. That's the Jesus I met. Not a cartoon. Not a stained glass icon. But a real, living Savior who knows every detail of our sin and still reaches out with mercy. But he also doesn't sugarcoat things. He made it clear that time is running out. That this lukewarm version of Christianity so many of us have embraced is not enough. It never was. As the weeks passed after my near-death experience, I began to see the world through a kind of spiritual lens I never had before. I could walk into a room and immediately feel the presence of heaviness or deception. I started seeing things in people's eyes, pain they were hiding, fear they were carrying. I'm not claiming to be some prophet or mystic. I'm just a man who was allowed to see behind the curtain, and once you've seen that, it changes you forever. There was a day I went into a coffee shop, and a woman behind the counter looked at me and smiled like normal, but I could feel it. She was dying inside. I don't know how I knew, but I did. I felt this pull to ask her, "Are you okay?" She looked startled, and tears welled up immediately. She said no one had asked her that in months. Her son had died in a car crash 6 weeks earlier, and she was drowning in grief. I shared what I'd been through. I told her about Jesus, how real he is, how close. And right there, behind that counter, she grabbed my hand and asked me to pray with her. We both cried. I walked out of that shop knowing this is what I was spared for. Not to be famous. Not to go viral. But to speak life into a dying world, one person at a time. And that's what I want you to understand if you're still watching this. You're not here by accident. You didn't click this video because you were bored. You were drawn to it. Something in your spirit recognized something true. And that's not me, it's him. He's speaking to you just like he spoke to me. The question is, will you listen? Eventually, I had to face the truth that not everyone will. Some people will watch this and mock it. Some will scroll right past and shrug. Some will even call themselves Christians and still ignore what's being said here. That's heartbreaking, but it's reality. Jesus told us the road is narrow, and few find it. He wasn't being dramatic, he was being honest. I've seen the crowds walking toward destruction with smiles on their faces. I've seen the chains people wrap around themselves with pride. And it breaks my heart. But more than that, it breaks his. Jesus didn't die so we could have a cozy little religion. He died to break every chain, to tear the veil, to bring the dead to life. And that includes you. See, no matter where you've been, what you've done, how far you've fallen, he's reaching for you. Right now. Through my voice. Through this story. Through your screen. He's not just calling you to believe. He's calling you to surrender. To give him every piece of your heart, your pain, your doubt, your guilt, your shame. And in return, he'll give you life, true life, eternal life. Not someday. But it starts with one decision. One moment of saying, Jesus, I'm yours. I'm not promising it'll be easy, but I can promise it's worth it. I've been to the edge of eternity, and I can tell you with everything in me, nothing else matters. Your career, your money, your image, your status, all of it fades. But his love, his mercy, his glory, that's forever. One of the hardest things to process after I came back was the weight of what I had seen. I wasn't just returning from a dream. I had tasted eternity. I had stood before the King of Kings. That light, his presence, it burned away every lie I had believed about myself and about this life. Coming back to earth, to this physical world, felt like waking up in a body that no longer fit me. The noise, the chaos, the distractions, they all felt so hollow, so temporary. I'd walk through the grocery store and see people scrolling their phones, complaining about the weather or their jobs, and all I could think was, you have no idea how close we are to the end. You have no idea how much he loves you. There was this tension in my chest, like I was constantly carrying a fire that wanted to pour out of me. And yet, people weren't always ready to hear it. Some would listen with glazed-over eyes. Some would nod politely and walk away. But then there were others, those few who would break down, who would weep, who would ask questions. It was in those moments I felt closest to Jesus again, like I was carrying out his mission. I wasn't just some guy with a story. I was his voice, echoing through time, through the internet, through a broken world. He didn't send me back to scare people. He sent me back to wake them up. Because too many of us are sleepwalking toward destruction, clutching things that will never save us. I remember this one night, not long after the experience, when I couldn't sleep. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I started weeping, deep, gut-wrenching sobs I couldn't control. It wasn't from fear or sadness. It was from this overwhelming sense of his love colliding with the world's blindness. I saw faces, so many faces, just moving through life like nothing mattered, like this world was all there is. I saw people I knew, people I loved, chasing success, or partying, or drowning in bitterness and pain. And I cried because I knew what waited on the other side. Not just judgment, but holiness. Purity. A light so bright, so perfect, it reveals every secret in your soul. I cried because I knew that if we could just get a glimpse of him, just a glimpse, it would change everything. But instead, we chase shadows. We numb ourselves. We fill our ears with noise so we don't have to hear that still, small voice calling us home. And I realized then that my job wasn't to save anyone. I can't. But I can testify. I can tell the truth. I can plant seeds. And I can trust that the same Jesus who reached into the pit to pull me out can do the same for them. For you, all he needs is your yes. Just one yes. One moment of surrender. I've had people ask me what Jesus looked like. And I struggle to answer that. Not because I don't remember, but because there's no earthly language that can fully describe him. It's not just how he looked, it's how he was. Every part of him radiated glory, but also gentleness. Majesty, but also compassion. His eyes, they saw everything, every thought, every motive, every hidden sin, but they weren't cold. They were filled with a sorrow so deep, I felt it cut through me. Not anger. Not rage. Sorrow. Like a father watching his child run into traffic, screaming for them to stop. That's what I felt in his gaze. And his voice, it wasn't loud, but it echoed through me like thunder. Every word he spoke seemed to reverberate into the deepest places of my soul, unlocking doors I didn't even know were shut. He didn't speak in riddles. He didn't need to. He just was truth. Truth in its purest form. And that truth didn't crush me, it set me free. It exposed me, but it also healed me. He told me things about my life no one knew. Things I had buried. Regrets. Secret sins. And yet, as he spoke them, I didn't feel shame. I felt forgiveness. Cleansing. Like years of filth washing off in seconds. I don't know how long I was with him. It could have been minutes, or it could have been hours. Time doesn't work the same there. But I would have stayed forever if he hadn't told me to go back. And when he did, I didn't want to. But he looked at me with such intensity and said, "They need to know. Go tell them. Before it's too late." Since then, my life has never been the same. I can't go back to who I was. I won't. And I won't water this down just to make it more comfortable for people. This isn't about religion. It's not about tradition or denominations. It's about Jesus. The real Jesus. The one who died, rose, and is coming again. I don't care if you've been to church your whole life or never set foot in one. None of that matters if you don't know him. I don't mean know about him. I mean know him. Talk to him. Surrender to him. Follow him. Because if you don't, you're playing a dangerous game with your eternity. I say that with no condemnation, just urgency. Because I've seen what's coming. I wasn't shown every detail, but I felt the weight of it. Something is shifting in the spiritual realm. The darkness is getting bolder, louder. And Jesus is calling his people to wake up, to stand firm, to be ready. July 15th wasn't a deadline. It was a warning shot. A divine alarm clock ringing through the heavens. A moment in time meant to shake us, to stir us. And it's not too late. If you're still breathing, it's not too late. But don't wait. Don't assume you'll have another chance. None of us are promised tomorrow. And I'm telling you with every fiber of my being, Jesus is real. He's alive. And he's calling your name right now. After a few weeks of being back, I started having dreams, vivid, intense visions that didn't feel like dreams at all. They felt like echoes of what I saw when I died. In one of them, I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a sea of people walking toward a dark fog. They didn't know it, but the fog was hiding a massive drop-off, a spiritual cliff that fell straight into torment. Some were dancing. Some were arguing. Some were numb, just walking with headphones in or eyes glazed over, staring at screens. But every single one of them was moving in the same direction, completely unaware of what was ahead. I tried to scream. I tried to wave my arms, to block the path, to stop them, but they either didn't hear me or didn't care. And then I felt Jesus standing beside me. He didn't say anything this time. He just looked at them with tears in his eyes. I remember waking up soaked in sweat, gasping for air. The burden on my heart was unbearable. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to eat. All I wanted was to go to every rooftop in America and shout his name. And still I felt so small. How was I supposed to reach all of them? How could I, one man, possibly make a dent in this ocean of distraction and deception? That's when I heard his voice again, not aloud, but so clearly in my spirit. You're not called to reach everyone. You're called to reach the ones I send you. And that broke me. Because I realized it wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about going viral or being famous. It was about obedience. One soul at a time. The fear of not being believed haunted me for a long time. I thought, what if they think I'm crazy? What if they say I made this all up for attention? But then I remembered how Jesus was treated. Even in his hometown, they rejected him. If the Son of God could be mocked, spit on, and crucified for telling the truth, then who was I to expect applause? So I kept going. I kept sharing. I started small, conversations with friends, social media posts, videos that I thought no one would watch. And little by little, people began reaching out. They said things like, I was about to give up, but your story made me fall to my knees. Or, I haven't prayed in years, but I just did for the first time after watching this. And that made every doubt, every tear, every sleepless night worth it. Because this isn't about me. This is about a king who stepped down from heaven to pull me from the grave, and he wants to do the same for you. That's the core of it. This story isn't mine to keep. It was given to me on borrowed breath, and I'll keep telling it until that breath runs out. Because whether you're rich or poor, broken or strong, religious or atheist, the truth remains, you were made for him. And your soul will never be satisfied until it finds its home in Jesus. I've also had people ask me, why you? Why did Jesus appear to you? What makes you so special? And the honest answer is, nothing. I'm not special. I was a wreck. I was full of pride, anger, hidden sins, and spiritual laziness. I wasn't someone you'd look at and say, that guy walks with God. I was going through the motions, living a decent life on the outside, but empty on the inside. And maybe that's why he came to me. Not because I earned it, but because I needed it. Because he wanted to prove, not just to me but to anyone listening, that he doesn't wait for us to be perfect before he reaches out. He comes into the mess. He walks into the storm. He finds the one sheep who wandered off and carries it home on his shoulders. That's the God we serve. Not a distant tyrant, but a loving Father who will shake heaven and earth to rescue you. I didn't deserve the mercy I was shown. But that's the point. None of us do. That's what makes it mercy. And if he can pull someone like me out of the pit, breathe life back into my body, and give me a mission, then he can do it for you too. No matter what you've done. No matter how far you've run. As long as there's breath in your lungs, there's hope. That's what I cling to every day. I want to tell you about something else Jesus showed me, something that still wrecks me when I think about it. It was this brief moment, but burned into my soul, where I saw people standing before him at the judgment. Not in hell. Not in heaven. Just in front of him. Their lives were laid bare like an open book. Everything they thought no one saw, every word, every action, every motive, was displayed in light so pure, it couldn't be denied. Some of them stood tall at first, proud, even defiant. But as the truth was revealed, they fell to their knees, weeping. Not because he was cruel, but because the weight of wasted time, of ignored chances, of pride and stubbornness, came crashing down. I saw tears that couldn't be wiped away, cries that couldn't be unsaid. And yet, even then, Jesus didn't turn away in disgust. His face was still full of love, of sorrow, of ache. I understood in that moment that hell wasn't just about punishment, it was about separation. It was about choosing to walk away from the only one who ever truly loved you. And the tragedy wasn't just in the judgment. It was in the wasted opportunities to choose him while they still could. That's why I'm desperate now. That's why I can't stay silent. Because the idea of someone hearing my story and shrugging it off, that terrifies me more than death. Please don't be one of them. Please don't wait until it's too late to realize he's been calling your name this whole time. One of the hardest parts of this whole journey has been trying to explain what Jesus looks like during that moment. People expect a glowing figure wrapped in light, maybe robes blowing in the wind, but it was so much more than that. When I saw him, it was like every ounce of love, power, and holiness in the universe was condensed into one presence. He wasn't just shining. He was the light, but the light wasn't blinding or scary. It was warm, safe, like being wrapped in the purest embrace you could imagine. His eyes were the hardest thing to look at. They pierced right through me, seeing everything, my doubts, my sins, my fears, and yet there was no condemnation. Just pure, overwhelming love. It was like every fear I'd ever had melted away in that gaze. But at the same time, there was a fire in him. A righteous fire that burned away everything fake, everything that didn't belong. I can't put into words the weight and gentleness of it at the same time. It wasn't just a person I was looking at, it was God himself, and every fiber of my being knew it. It's a feeling I carry with me even now, like a scar on my soul that reminds me every day that he is real. And he's waiting for us to come home. After I came back, the physical pain was nothing compared to the spiritual and emotional storm inside me. I felt like I was living two lives at once. One foot in this world, one foot in the one I saw on the other side. I struggled to explain to my family and friends what happened because, honestly, no words seemed enough. Most just nodded politely, like they didn't want to offend me, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. It was lonely. Sometimes, the loneliness was suffocating, like I was carrying a secret so heavy it threatened to crush me. But in those moments, I'd pray and hear his voice again, reminding me that the loneliness wasn't really mine to bear alone. He was with me, always. That truth kept me going. I remember one night, lying in bed, overwhelmed by everything, and I whispered, "Lord, why me? What do you want from me?" And the answer was simple, but it shook me to my core. To tell them. To be my voice in a world that has forgotten how to listen. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew my purpose, even if it scared me. Even if people thought I was crazy. Because the alternative, silence, was something I could never accept again. The more I shared, the more stories I heard from others who had experienced things they couldn't explain. People who had near-death experiences, visions, or moments of divine intervention. Some were from churches, some weren't. But the common thread was the same, a call to wake up. To stop living for temporary things that fade away and start living for eternity. I realized this wasn't just a story about me. It was a message God has been sending to millions across the world, through dreams, signs, warnings, and moments of grace. I read about prophets, saints, and ordinary people who all heard similar calls to prepare, to repent, to love deeply. It made me understand that my experience, while personal, was part of a much bigger plan. That plan is urgent because time is short. We're living in the last days, and God's patience is running thin. This world is hurtling toward judgment, but mercy is still here, for those who will reach out and take it. That's why I keep pushing forward with my message. Because if just one person turns back to God because of what I share, then every tear and every moment of doubt was worth it. I also want to share about the overwhelming peace I felt during that experience. You'd think dying would be terrifying, but for me, it was like slipping into the most restful sleep you've ever known, but with full awareness. The fear, pain, and confusion I had felt before vanished instantly. There was no pain, no anxiety, just peace so deep I can barely describe it. It was as if every burden I'd carried in this life was lifted at once. And yet, in the middle of that peace, came the command. Not a gentle suggestion, but a firm, loving command from Jesus. Go back. Warn them. Tell them what you've seen. I wanted to stay. I wanted to rest in that peace forever. But the mission was clear. I was given a second chance to live, not for myself, but to be a messenger. That choice, between the comfort of eternity and the struggle of this world, was one I didn't take lightly. I knew from that moment that my life would never be the same. I'd never be able to settle for small talk, empty distractions, or surface-level faith again. Every breath I take now is fueled by the memory of that moment and the urgent message He gave me to share. After returning to my body, the days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and confusion. I couldn't sleep well, and when I did, the memories of that place, that presence, would flood back in vivid detail, almost like I was living both worlds at once. I remember sitting alone in my living room, my hands trembling as I tried to write down everything I could remember, but the words felt so small compared to the enormity of what I experienced. The smell of the hospital, the sterile lights, the sound of machines beeping, it all felt distant now, like a faded echo of a life I wasn't sure I belonged to anymore. People around me tried to bring me back to normal, but how could I explain that normal didn't make sense anymore? That I'd seen something so real, so powerful, it changed everything? I felt like a stranger to myself, caught between disbelief and the undeniable truth I carried in my soul. Every conversation, every moment of silence, was heavy with the weight of what I had to say but couldn't fully express without sounding like I was losing my mind. My family was both my rock and my challenge. They wanted to support me, but they also feared what this experience might mean for my mental health. My wife, Sarah, was patient, but I saw the worry in her eyes, especially when I'd break down crying out of nowhere, overwhelmed by the memories and the message I had to deliver. My children, though young, noticed the change in me, the deeper voice, the solemn look that replaced my usual lightheartedness. I tried to shield them from the heaviness, but I couldn't hide everything. At times, I wondered if it was selfish to carry this burden, to live with a secret so heavy it pressed down on every part of my life. But then I'd remember the voice, the command from Jesus, and I'd find strength to keep going. The struggle wasn't just about surviving physically anymore. It was about living with purpose, about fighting the spiritual battle I'd been thrust into, even when the world around me seemed uninterested or unbelieving. This was bigger than me, bigger than my pain, and I had to hold on to that. I began to notice small signs everywhere, little nudges that reminded me I wasn't alone in this mission. It could be a verse in the Bible jumping off the page during quiet moments, a song on the radio that hit me deep, or even a stranger's kind word that felt like a whisper from God. Those moments kept me grounded and reminded me that God's presence was not just in that extraordinary near-death moment, but here with me now. It was like a thread of divine light weaving through the darkness of everyday life, pulling me forward when I felt lost or weak. I also started praying more, not just the rote prayers from my past, but deep, raw conversations where I poured out my fears, my doubts, and my hopes. In those prayers, I often felt a response, not always in words, but in a peace that wrapped around me like a shield. This peace wasn't the absence of trouble, but a calm in the storm, a quiet assurance that no matter what, I was exactly where God wanted me to be. It's a lesson I want others to understand, especially those struggling to believe or those feeling forgotten or hopeless. One of the hardest truths I had to accept was how many people around me were asleep spiritually. I'd always thought faith was widespread and vibrant, but after that experience, I realized how deeply lost so many are. The distractions of the world, money, success, entertainment, comfort, have blinded people to the reality of eternity. Jesus made it clear to me that many are living like there's no tomorrow, caught in patterns of sin and numbness, unaware of the urgency of the times. It's heartbreaking because God's love is available to everyone, but so few are reaching out to receive it. I remember the exact words Jesus told me, "Tell them to wake up. Tell them the time is now. The door is open, but it won't be forever." Those words burned into my heart and haunt me daily. I feel a desperate need to reach as many souls as possible before it's too late. It's not about fear-mongering or judgment. It's about truth and love, about giving people the chance to turn back before the final call. That's why I'm here sharing this with you now. Because maybe, just maybe, this message will be the spark that wakes someone up, saves a soul, or changes a life forever. There was one moment weeks after the event when I found myself standing in the kitchen, overwhelmed by the weight of what I'd seen and heard. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes as I looked at my reflection in the window. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. The guy I used to be, carefree, distracted by everyday worries, felt like a distant memory. That night, I dropped to my knees and begged God for strength. I asked him to help me carry this message without fear, without doubt, and without the crippling loneliness that so often tried to consume me. I didn't know how or when, but I promised that I would not keep silent. I vowed to share everything, no matter how difficult or how much I risked losing. Because what I experienced wasn't just a personal miracle, it was a divine mission. I felt like a messenger sent back to a broken world that desperately needed to hear the truth. I've never felt such a heavy but holy responsibility in my entire life. That's what drives me forward every single day, even when the path feels impossible. I also want to tell you about the dreams I started having after that near-death experience. They weren't like normal dreams, but more like vivid visions that felt like glimpses into the spiritual realm. In these dreams, I saw people from all walks of life. Some I knew, some I didn't, standing at crossroads, making choices that would shape their eternal destiny. Some were turning toward light and peace, while others were walking away, trapped by fear or pride. These dreams weren't just random images. They carried messages, warnings, and sometimes encouragement. One in particular has stayed with me, a vision of a dark storm cloud covering the earth, swallowing cities and hearts alike. But even within that storm, there was a ray of light breaking through, a symbol of hope and salvation for those who would turn to Jesus. When I woke from that dream, I knew it was a reminder that despite the darkness and chaos in the world, God's light is always shining, waiting to guide us back home. These dreams continue to fuel my passion and remind me that every soul matters in this battle between light and darkness. Sharing this testimony hasn't been easy. I've faced ridicule, skepticism, and even rejection from people I once considered friends. Some have accused me of seeking attention or questioned my sanity. There were nights when those doubts gnawed at me, threatening to silence my voice. But I remember the peace I felt in that other place, the fire in Jesus' eyes, and the urgency of the message he entrusted to me. That keeps me going when the world tries to shut me down. I don't share this to win arguments or to impress anyone. I share because I've been given a glimpse of eternity, and I can't unsee what I saw. Every soul I reach is a victory in a war bigger than most people realize. My hope is that those listening will open their hearts and consider the possibility that what I'm saying is true, that Jesus is real, that heaven and hell are real, and that the choices we make here and now echo into eternity. This message isn't meant to scare you but to awaken you, to offer hope and a way back to God's loving embrace before it's too late. Lastly, I want to say this: if you're struggling with doubt or fear, know that you're not alone. I was once there too, lost in the noise of this world, unsure if any of it was real. But the experience I had changed everything. I know the truth with every fiber of my being. Jesus loves you more than you can imagine, and he's calling you home. The door to salvation is open right now. It doesn't matter what you've done or where you've been, his grace is bigger than any mistake. All you have to do is reach out, believe, and accept the gift he's offering. That decision is yours. I pray this testimony touches your heart and stirs something deep inside you. Because the time is short and the call is urgent. Don't wait. Don't ignore the whisper of the Spirit. Jesus is real. He is waiting, and he is calling you by name. In the days that followed, I became painfully aware of how fragile life truly is. Every breath felt like a gift, every moment a chance to change. I remember waking up one morning, the sunlight filtering softly through the curtains, and suddenly being hit with the overwhelming awareness that my time on this earth wasn't guaranteed. That experience on the other side had shown me how quickly things could change, how thin the veil really is between this life and what comes after. It was like I had been given a second chance, a rare opportunity to live differently, to live with purpose, with urgency, and with a heart wide open to God's will. I realized that the distractions that used to fill my days, the endless chasing of success, the worries about money, the little irritations, were all meaningless in the grand scheme of eternity. That realization was both freeing and terrifying. It pushed me to examine everything about my life, my relationships, my faith, my priorities. It was a reckoning I didn't ask for but deeply needed. I also noticed a change in how I saw other people. Where before I might have judged or overlooked someone, I began to see them through a lens of compassion and urgency. I thought about the countless souls walking through life blind to what truly matters, unaware of the eternal stakes. My heart ached for them. I couldn't understand how anyone could go on living day after day without stopping to consider what Jesus had shown me, that this life is just a fleeting moment compared to eternity. I started to pray for strangers, for friends, for even those who had hurt me. I prayed that God would open their eyes, soften their hearts, and give them a hunger for truth. It was a new kind of love, a deep, spiritual love that went beyond surface kindness. It was a love born from having seen the light and feeling desperate for others to find it before it's too late. This new perspective became a driving force in everything I did. But with this new burden came a loneliness that I hadn't expected. Sharing the message wasn't always met with open arms. In fact, many times I was met with cold shoulders, dismissive comments, or worse, mockery. Friends stopped calling, family members looked at me like I was a different person, or worse, like I was broken. That pain cut deep. There were nights when I'd cry out to God, asking why I had to carry this alone, why I was being rejected for something so important. I wrestled with feelings of doubt and isolation, questioning if I was really meant for this path. But every time I doubted, the memory of Jesus' face, the peace I'd felt, and the urgency of his message pulled me back. I realized that the path of truth is often lonely, but it's also the only path worth walking. That's why I keep going. Because even if I stand alone, the truth remains. And it's that truth that has the power to save lives, to bring hope, and to change the world one soul at a time. I want to be clear, this isn't just a story about me. It's about something far bigger. It's about the reality of heaven and hell, about God's immense love and the urgent call for us all to turn back to Him. The message Jesus gave me was a plea for awakening, a cry for revival in a world drowning in apathy and sin. He showed me glimpses of the end times, not to scare, but to warn and prepare. The clock is ticking, and every soul has a choice to make. This testimony is my way of sounding that alarm, of sharing a glimpse of eternity to shake people out of their spiritual slumber. I pray with everything in me that those who hear this will respond, not just with words, but with real, life-changing decisions. Because the stakes couldn't be higher. Eternity is real, Jesus is real, and He is calling you right now. Will you answer? There was a day, not long after everything happened, when I found myself sitting alone in a quiet park near my home. The air was still, and the soft rustling of leaves felt like the world was holding its breath. I thought back to the moment my soul left my body, to the light and love that surrounded me, and to Jesus' voice, gentle but urgent, telling me to tell everyone. I remember feeling overwhelmed, as if the weight of the entire world's souls was resting on my shoulders. It was a crushing, yet holy burden. And in that stillness, I realized that sharing this story wasn't just about me. It was about every single person who might one day stand where I did, at the crossroads between this life and what's beyond. I thought about my family, my friends, even strangers I'd never meet. I felt a deep, burning need to reach them all, to make sure they knew that this life is temporary and that Jesus' love is eternal. That moment marked a turning point for me. I was no longer just a man who had a near-death experience. I was a messenger with a mission to save souls. The days and weeks after that realization were a whirlwind of emotion. I battled fear and doubt constantly. What if no one believed me? What if I was mistaken? But then I would remember the overwhelming peace that came with Jesus' presence, the unmistakable light that was brighter than anything on earth. I remembered the words He spoke, filled with both love and urgency. I started to study the Bible with a new hunger, searching for answers, comfort, and confirmation. I wanted to understand everything I could about the end times, about God's promises, and about how to live a life that pleases Him. The more I learned, the more certain I became that what I experienced was real, and that the message I was given was not just a warning, but a loving invitation. Jesus wants us all to come home, to turn away from sin, and to walk in His light. He doesn't want anyone to be lost, and that's why the call is so urgent. The closer we get to the end, the louder that call becomes. I want to share something else with you, something deeply personal. After my near-death experience, my relationships changed in unexpected ways. Some people pulled away because they couldn't understand or accept what I was going through. But others drew closer, inspired by the change they saw in me. I began to value honesty and vulnerability like never before. I opened up to those closest to me about my fears, my hopes, and the mission God had placed on my heart. I realized how important it is to have a community that supports you in your spiritual walk. If you're feeling lost or alone right now, please know that you don't have to face it by yourself. God's family is there to hold you, to lift you, and to guide you through the darkest times. And if you don't yet have that support, I encourage you to seek it out, to find a church, a small group, or even someone who can listen and pray with you. This journey of faith isn't meant to be walked alone, and there is incredible power in fellowship. Before I finish this part of my testimony, I want to leave you with a final, urgent plea. If what I've shared touches your heart, if you feel that stir inside you, the gentle tug of the Holy Spirit, don't ignore it. Don't push it aside or doubt it. This moment right now could be the turning point in your life. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to be perfect. Jesus meets us where we are, with open arms and infinite love. If you're ready to accept Him, to turn away from the things that hold you back, and to walk in the light of His truth, then I encourage you to pray this simple prayer with me. Jesus, I believe you are real. I believe you died for my sins and rose again. I invite you into my heart and life today. Please forgive me, guide me, and help me live for you. If you prayed that prayer, know that you are not alone. You are now part of God's family, and He will never leave you. I pray that you will keep seeking Him, keep growing in faith, and keep spreading His love. The time is short, the call is urgent, and Jesus is waiting for you. Don't wait any longer, answer His call today. In the weeks after that prayer, I noticed a shift not only in myself but in the world around me. It's hard to explain unless you felt it, but everything seemed sharper, more vivid, like a veil had been lifted from my eyes. I began to notice signs and moments of grace I'd overlooked before. Simple things, like the kindness of a stranger or the beauty of a sunset, suddenly felt like messages from God reminding me that He is still here, still at work. Yet, alongside that beauty, I also saw the darkness creeping into the hearts of many people around me. I saw how easy it was for people to get caught up in distractions, addictions, and lies that pull us further away from the truth. It broke my heart to realize how many are blind to the eternal consequences of their choices. But at the same time, I felt an unshakable hope, a hope that no matter how lost someone might seem, God's love is bigger, stronger, and more powerful. He is always ready to forgive and to bring people back from the brink. That hope became my anchor in the storm. There was one particular moment during this time that I'll never forget. I was driving home late one night when a sudden, violent storm hit. The rain pounded the windshield, the thunder shook the car, and the road was barely visible. I was terrified. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they hurt. But in the midst of that fear, I heard a still, small voice inside me say, "I am with you." It was the same peace I'd felt during my near-death experience, the peace that surpasses all understanding. That moment changed everything. I realized that no matter what storms come in life, literal or spiritual, I am never alone. Jesus promised to be with us always, even to the end of the age, and that promise is true. That night, I prayed harder than I ever had, asking God to keep me close, to guide my steps, and to help me be a light in the darkness. From that point on, every challenge I faced felt different. I knew I could face it because I wasn't walking through it alone. As I continued to share my story with others, I found that people's responses varied widely. Some were eager to hear more, curious and open to the possibility that there is more to life than what we see. Others were skeptical, even hostile. It was hard not to take the rejection personally, but over time I learned that my job isn't to convince people but to be faithful, to speak the truth with love and leave the rest to God. The Bible says that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. My testimony is one piece of that puzzle. I've come to see that planting a seed is often the best we can do, and it's God who makes it grow. I pray that the seeds planted through my story will one day bloom into lives transformed by Jesus. I believe that nothing is wasted when we share what God has given us. Even the smallest conversation, the briefest prayer, can change a life forever. There's so much more I could say, but what matters most is this. Jesus is real, He loves you more than you can imagine, and He is calling you now. If you're watching this and feel a stirring in your heart, don't ignore it. Don't wait until tomorrow or next week or after you've got your life together. The truth is, none of us have it all figured out. We all have doubts, fears, and struggles. But God's grace is bigger than all of that. His arms are open wide, ready to welcome you home no matter where you've been or what you've done. If you want to experience that peace and love for yourself, all you have to do is say yes. Say yes to Jesus, say yes to new life, say yes to a future filled with hope and purpose. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Reach out to someone, find a community, and keep seeking. The journey is just beginning. I pray that this testimony has touched your heart and that you will take the step today to answer God's call.